Since October 2023, a growing number of testimonies, reports, and investigations have pointed to a disturbing transformation taking place behind prison walls. What was once described as a detention system has, according to multiple human rights organizations, evolved into something far more systematic and far more severe. In January 2026, a report compiling testimonies from recently released Palestinian prisoners described the Israeli prison system not simply as harsh or overcrowded, but as a coordinated network of abuse, one in which violence, deprivation, and psychological pressure were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader structure. The conclusion is stark. This is not about individual misconduct, it is about a system. To understand the weight of that claim, you have to start with the scale. By September 2025, over 10,800 Palestinians were being held in Israeli custody. That number had more than doubled compared to pre-war figures in 2023. Among them were men, women, and at least 350 minors. Thousands were being held without formal charges under administrative detention. Others were classified under legal categories that allowed for indefinite incarceration without trial. For many, there was no clear timeline for release, no formal conviction, and no meaningful legal recourse. But the legal framework is only one part of the story. What defines this system, according to testimonies, is what happens inside. Former detainees consistently describe conditions that go far beyond overcrowding. Cells designed for a handful of people reportedly held far more, forcing prisoners to sleep on bare floors, often without mattresses or blankets. In some cases, prisoners describe being held in underground sections with no access to daylight at all. Basic hygiene, something often taken for granted, becomes a form of deprivation. Prisoners report being allowed to shower for only few minutes at a time, sometimes going months without a change of clothes. Water access is limited, and in some cases contaminated. The result is not just discomfort, but the rapid spread of disease. One illness in particular, scabies, has spread widely through multiple facilities, exacerbated by overcrowding and lack of treatment. Reports suggest that thousands of prisoners have been affected with little to no adequate medical response. And medical neglect itself appears repeatedly throughout these accounts. Detainees describe injuries left untreated, chronic conditions ignored, and in some cases severe medical deterioration that led to permanent damage. These are testimonies of prisoners who lost limbs after prolonged injuries went untreated, and accounts of individuals being forced into medical decisions under extreme pressure, including amputations. Between October 2023 and the end of 2025, dozens of Palestinian detainees died in custody. Some reports estimate that the number to be even higher. In many cases, the circumstances surrounding these deaths remain unclear, partly due to limited access to independent autopsies and restricted oversight. But the physical conditions and medical neglect are only one layer of what these testimonies describe. Another is violence. Not sporadic or unpredictable violence, but routine, repeated, and according to multiple sources, institutionalized. Former prisoners describe beatings occurring at nearly every stage of detention, during arrest, upon arrival at facilities, during interrogations, and even during daily procedures like roll calls or transfers between cells. Methods described include the use of electrical shocks, tear gas in confined spaces, and physical assaults, severe enough to cause fractures, internal bleeding, and loss of consciousness. Some detainees report being attacked by dogs during interrogations or while restrained. Interrogation techniques themselves are a central part of these accounts. Detainees describe being held in stress positions for extended periods, positions designed to cause intense physical pain without leaving obvious external injuries. Others report prolonged sleep deprivation, exposure to extreme noise, and confinement in conditions designed to disorient and break psychological resistance. One particularly disturbing detail that appears in multiple testimonies is the use of what detainees refer to as the disco room, a space where loud music was played continuously at extreme volumes, contributing to sensory overload, disorientation, and in some cases, physical harm such as ruptured eardrums. But perhaps the most disturbing pattern to emerge from these testimonies is the repeated mention of sexual violence. Accounts include forced stripping, threats of sexual assault, and in some cases, descriptions of direct sexual abuse. Detainees describe being assaulted with objects, attacked in sensitive areas, or subjected to acts intended not only to cause physical harm, but to inflict humiliation and psychological trauma. These are not isolated allegations. Similar patterns have been referenced in reports submitted to international bodies, including the United Nations Committee Against Torture, and echoed in independent investigations. The psychological dimension of this system is just as significant as the physical one. Former detainees describe systemic humiliation, being filmed while naked, forced to repeat phrases under coercion, subjected to insults targeting their families, and threatened with harm to their loved ones. Some report being told that their families had been killed, statements that, whether true or false, had profound psychological impact. Others describe attempts to recruit them as informants, using a combination of threats, deprivation, and psychological manipulation. Beyond the walls of the cells, another pattern emerges: isolation. Since October 2023, family visits for many detainees have been suspended. Access to independent monitoring bodies have been restricted, even legal representation has been limited, with reports of lawyers being denied entry and monitored during meetings or prevented them from bringing in documents. This isolation serves multiple purposes. It reduces external oversight, it limits the flow of information, and it increases the psychological pressure on detainees who are cut off from any support system. Even after release, the pressure does not necessarily end. Some former prisoners report being warned not to speak about their experiences, with threats of rearrest if they do. This creates an environment where many accounts may never be told, and where the full scope of what is happening remains difficult to verify in its entirety. Despite this, the consistency across testimonies is striking. Different individuals held in different facilities at different times describe similar patterns: violence, deprivation, humiliation, and isolation. When viewed together, these accounts form a picture that human rights organizations argue cannot be dismissed as coincidence. The broader context also matters. These developments are occurring alongside ongoing conflict, heightened political tensions, and widespread violence in Gaza and the West Bank. The same structural dynamics, dehumanization, collective punishment, and the normalization of extreme measures, are cited as underlying factors shaping both the treatment of prisoners and the broader situation. Perhaps one of the most controversial aspects of this issue is not just the allegations themselves, but the response to them. According to reports, some of these conditions have been publicly displayed or acknowledged, rather than hidden. Media coverage within Israel has at times presented restrictive prison conditions as necessary or justified, particularly in the context of security concerns. At the same time, international response has been limited. While reports have been submitted to global institutions and covered by international media, there has been little in the way of decisive intervention. This lack of action, critics argue, contributes to the continuation of these practices. The result is a system that, according to its critics, operates with a high degree of visibility and a low level of accountability. A system where the lines between detention, punishment, and abuse become increasingly blurred. And a system that raises fundamental questions, not only about legality or policy, but about the limits of power, the role of oversight, and the human cost of conflict. Because beyond the numbers, beyond the classifications, and beyond the political narratives, there are individuals at the center of this. People who entered the system under one set of expectations and came out describing something else entirely, something they call a living hell.